Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dominique Crosby, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I am the Associate Director for Residential Life at the University of San Francisco. But for these purposes, I am the Participant Coordinator for the National Housing Training Institute, and I serve on the coordinating committee for NHTI. And I thank you all so much for coming today. We're excited to host an information session for folks so that you can understand a little bit more about NHTI, maybe get some of your questions answered that you may have, as well as hear from some of our past participants. So you can learn a little bit more about what the experience has been for folks who have attended NHTI. I attended NHTI in 2019. And so I also understand that experience as well and can answer some questions, but I have some other past participants here who will introduce themselves in a little bit, so that not every opinion about NHTI comes from me, because obviously I'm excited as someone who's looking to help bring more people into NHTI, but I want you to hear from some other folks. So I'm just going to give you a very brief history of NHTI, just so that you have some understanding. So NHTI started in 1991. And it was designed really to be a professional development opportunity for folks who are hoping to continue working in housing, right? And we have continued to have that same philosophy as NHTI has continued over the years. And it started at the University of Florida, and was there for about 10 years. And then it moved to the University of Maryland. So just knowing that it's been a couple of different places, and I'll talk about some other places that it's been. In 2005, it was renamed for James C. Grimm, who is one of the founders of NHTI. Really, if you think about it, cool, I wanting to honor the folks who've done the work to create something that's really impactful for folks in our field. And the Institute itself then continued on and was at the University of Georgia for a couple of years, and then has moved to other places. Michigan State and University of South Florida hosted it together for a couple of years. And then Texas Christian University hosted it most recently. And that's where I attended my NHTI institute. And now we are moving to the West Coast for the first time, which is really exciting as someone who works on the West Coast and is a West Coast baby. It's exciting to hear it come over here, and it's going to be hosted at the University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. So we are excited to move it to this coast, have it in a different space, make sure that folks on the other coasts, get some love over here. A lot of our Kuai love is all over, but we want to make sure that these folks are also having it. So the important pieces to know about NHTI this coming year is going to be hosted July 8th through July 11th. And it is an institute, and I think it's really important to know that an institute is different than a conference. And so at an institute, we try to also have some smaller opportunities for folks, and it is curriculum based. And so I always want to stress out, folks, it's not this conference where you're going to go and try a million different things. You're going to go, there's a set curriculum for you. You're going to be together the entire time and go through this process with one another for 4 days. At the Institute, we also break folks up into what we call clusters. And these clusters become like a family for some folks that you can reach out to while you're at the Institute and way beyond that. I still reach out to my cluster, and we have meetings maybe like once every other month at this point, that we just come together and talk. In that cluster, there are 4 participants, 3 to 4 depending on numbers, but 4 is our magic number, 4 participants, and then 1 faculty member. And the faculty is going to be there to help lead you through the Institute, to talk about the different things that we talk about each day, to debrief with you, and then more importantly, to talk about you. I think that's the piece around NHTI that isn't probably written on the paper for you, right? When you hear an institute, you're like, okay, we're going to learn something about housing. I'm going to be prepared. And that's absolutely true. But the other piece is really to help you as a professional figure out what's next for you. What professional development do you need? Can this person become a mentor for you? And how can they support you along your career, even beyond NHTI? So we have 12 faculty members who serve on our NHTI each year. And each one of them does a couple of different things. They support their clusters. Every single one of them has a cluster group. They may do a presentation. So we have different topics that are focused on at NHTI, and the faculty will maybe do a presentation on those topics. So that's the learning that you're used to. They might help with some small group discussions. And we've already started recruiting for those folks. You may have seen that show up in Connections a few weeks back, where we were looking for faculty, and our faculty coordinator is working on selecting those folks now. And once we've selected them, those people will be announced, so you have some understanding of who are the faculty, what do they know, and how can I learn from those people as well, right? And so that is what the faculty do typically. And again, they're tied to your cluster. And it's at this we move from institution to institution for a couple of years, giving you exposure to different folks, different places. And while you're there, you'll go through a multitude, again, of sessions together, both formalized in the day, and then the informal pieces are also just as important at NHTI. You will live around each other and together as an entire cohort, and housing is included in NHTI, and so you don't need to worry. You don't go live in a hotel or anything. We'll provide housing there as part of the Institute package, which again helps you really be connected to that experience the entire time. So we want to be sure that you are always thinking about it, right? Like you're really immersed in NHTI when you're in it. And I try to tell people that because I think it's really important to understand that we are asking that you dedicate your time to this institute while you're there, which may be a little different than if you were in a conference setting where you can dip out and do some different things. You would be noticed if you weren't in a session, and someone would check on you and wonder if you needed something. I just wanted to go over also the competency areas for the Institute that are going to be focused on. So these are the presentations that I'm talking about will focus on these things. So leadership and professional development is one session in one competency area, which talks about the ethics, thinking about personal growth, social identities, competencies, leadership style, so some of those things. The next thing is going to be around resources, so thinking about budgets, facilities, occupancy management, right? Maybe you aren't exposed to that in your current role, but it may be something that you need moving forward, right? The next thing is human resources. We know that we have a lot of humans in our field, whether those be students or staff that you're going to work with. And so how do you work with people from personnel management, thinking about feedback and coaching and evaluation of the folks that you're working with. The next competency area is belonging. It examines student belonging, right? As we know, students are at the center of the work that we're doing and is critical to housing and residence life. And so we want to really talk about how do we focus on helping students belong, and what does that look like for us? The next competency area is assessment and planning. I know that not everyone is really interested in assessment. It might be your passion area, and that's great. And it might be something you have no experience with. But we know that as you continue to work in housing and residence life, it's going to be really important that you understand how to do some assessment and planning, right? Whether that's outcomes forecasting, or really thinking about how to assess the programming that your department is doing. The next competency area is risk management, which explores elements around risk management principles, right? When we think about all of the areas of risk that may come into play with students who live on campus. The next is politics. So thinking about power, influence, the connections on campus, bureaucracy, if you will, processes. And so not just when you think about human resources, we're talking about those personal connections, but politics might take it one step further, right? So those personal connections, but what's at stake for me versus what's at stake for another person that I'm interacting with? And what are they looking to get, right? We might all be wanting something, and there's a little bit of some politics that goes into that. And then lastly, current issues. What are the things that are facing us in housing and residence life today? And then broader around student affairs and higher education. And what are those things and how can we focus on them? So again, the faculty will do presentations on those things, in which will have you grapple with every aspect of your role, thinking about every piece of what you're doing maybe now, and then what you're aspiring to do, right? I often ask for folks to think about what they're aspiring to be when they're at NHTI and how they can think from that lens. And your faculty and your cluster members will be the folks to help you really drill into that lens, because that might be completely different than the role that you do every day. When I went to NHTI, I just started in an assistant director role, and it moved from a residence director role. And I really didn't know the difference of thinking that I was going to need to be in, and NHTI really helped me change the way I was thinking about things, move from this focus on one building that I really knew and loved and only cared about to some of the focus that was bigger for the entire department. And what are other things that just weren't in my wheelhouse at all, that would become really important to me as an assistant director, and now as an associate director might be my day-to-day work. And I attribute a lot of that understanding to my experience at NHTI and having some pretty frank conversations and learning a lot from the folks who were there. So that is the broad strokes of NHTI. The important pieces are what is it and when it is. And then another piece that folks probably want to know is how much. The Institute is $1,600, and that does cover the Institute itself. That covers your lodging and meals. So it is a big package deal. So it covers a lot of different things. It doesn't cover your transportation, so you have to figure out how to get there. But we do have scholarships and things available that we'll talk about you applying for if you need to help you offset the cost if your institution may not be supporting you fully in that way. So that's my overview, but I also want you to hear from some folks about their experiences because I think that's equally as important as, you know, here's the nuts and bolts of something, but here's the experience that folks have. So I have a couple of panelists here today who are going to share a little bit about themselves, and we're gonna start with some introductions before I jump into some questions for them, and then we'll open it up for everyone to ask any questions that you may have as well. So we'll do introductions, folks. And again, that's your name, your institution, your title, and the year that you attended NHTI. Okay, Crystal, we'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, really nice to see everyone super interested. My name is Crystal Romero. I work at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas, which is in the North Texas area. And I serve as area coordinator, which means I supervise the RDs or resident directors in the building. And I attended NHTI this past summer in 2023 at TCU.
Yeah. And yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiana Talley. I'm currently serve as an assistant director at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. And I also attended NHTI this past summer. So, hey, Crystal.
And then our third person isn't here. And so again, I attended in 2019. So I will answer some questions with them as well. So just getting us started for folks, how has attending NHTI impacted your experience in housing since you've attended? And Kiana, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I think some of my favorite sessions that our faculty presented on, one was the budgeting and also the facilities pieces. Two places I wanted to know more about, but did not have a lot of experience outside of just the smaller budgets that I had. But April talking about projections and the spreadsheet that she has to consider when we have extra beds, when we don't have extra beds. So that really put into mind frame, like not only this upcoming year, but what does our institution look like in 3 to 5 or 10 years? And how can I be a part of that? Or how can I be a part of those discussions? I think it made me a little bit more bold to ask those questions in some of those meetings of like, right now we are in the process of renovating one of our buildings and a bid did not go through. So I was asking tons of questions of how is this going to impact us in 3 to 5 years? What is this going to look like? What does our budget look like now? And I don't know if I would have been able to ask some of those questions if it was not for one of those sessions at NHTI. So I would say it makes me a little bit more bolder, but now I feel like I can be a part of those conversations and actually understand what's happening when I'm in a room like that.
Thank you. What about you, Crystal?
Yeah, I would second all of that. That's so true. Having the knowledge and the context about a lot of these things is really, really important because it helps you feel more prepared and less of a, how do we say, like that imposter syndrome when we walk into the room or you know, feel like maybe we don't totally belong. This, you know, actually prepared you and gives you something tangible to kind of leave from. But I think aside from that, for me, I recognize and kind of learn the importance of maintaining a professional network. So our jobs are so big, you know, in res life, we're so busy all the time. And we're typically understaffed in a lot of ways. So we're just constantly treading water, right? We're trying to move, you know, beyond the moment and trying to like get through the semester or get through, you know, the Institute allowed me to kind of take a second and focus on myself and think, okay, I can actually build a career trajectory. Like I can know where I'm going, and it's okay to have that conviction, right? Our faculty mentors really talk to us about, taking care of yourself and kind of laying out a plan and looking to see like, this is why it's important to have context all over, right? And to get to build that network beyond just your institution, why it matters, and also to kind of brainstorm ideas of, like, where do you see yourself in a few years and what does that look like? And actually the opportunity to kind of focus on myself allowed me to sort of see beyond the moment and kind of take a second and breathe. And since then I've been able to keep up with not just my faculty mentor, but our different mentors and have conversations with them. Sometimes something will happen that's related to a session that one of these mentors taught on, and I can reach out to them and say, hey, like, you sort of work adjacent to human resources, or I've never thought about assessment in this way. Can you help me? And so it's been really, really helpful to sort of have those individuals to sort of fall back on, and then also know that I have advocates and I have support for me in those kind of hard spaces that I, maybe didn't before feel comfortable with talking that readily about. So I feel like, it's changed me professionally in so many ways, but those are kind of the immediate ones that come to mind.
Thank you. I really appreciate the mention of reaching out to other faculty, because I think it's easy to think of, oh, I have my one faculty and I can reach out to them. But the other 11 are all open to reaching out to whoever, right? And to supporting whoever's in the cohort. Essentially, that's what they sign up for, right? Like they're excited to really help mentor and guide the next generations of folks who are going to work in housing and residence life, right? And so I appreciate that piece, because I think that also really propelled me. I have relationships with other faculty that maybe just in general I was closer to, right? Where we had identities that meshed more, and I can reach out to them or have a closer relationship than my own faculty. And I love the relationship I have with them, but I think we will see different faculty for different things, different identities of people who can support you in different ways, and you want to be able to reach out to any of them after and during the Institute. The next question I have for you all is, what was your favorite part about NHTI? And Crystal, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. So I encourage you that if you decide to proceed with this process, to kind of go in with an open mind. But I knew going into this process, I am a very introverted person who's kind of shy and gets really anxious in social situations, right? So that's setting myself up for some challenges. So I went in knowing that it was going to be difficult, but I also wanted to remind myself that it was going to be for my betterment. So at the beginning of the Institute, they really encouraged us to push ourselves. And so I went in trying to figure out, well, what is challenging to me? What is difficult for me? And to really, really lean into that. I say it was my favorite part. It was difficult, right? Because I was intentionally putting myself in a position that felt vulnerable and knew, like, having intentional conversations and being vulnerable and being transparent. I would take the mic from time to time and share how I was feeling. That's not comfortable for me, right? But it grows you and it stretches you. After completion, right, of the Institute, like that night, I remember kind of sitting alone and just sort of breathing and feeling like, I really put my full self into that. And I feel like, through that, I felt super like I was refining myself and challenging myself, and I was really proud of myself, right? And so in the ways that it was my favorite, it was also difficult. But I felt like in the end, looking back, even though it was only like a 3 or 4 day period, I've met individuals that I continue to talk to, that I hope to maintain those relationships for years beyond, just this past summer. So I think my favorite way was it was just how challenging it was, but how changed I felt by leaning into what felt difficult at the time, and sort of the reward on the back end, which are those connections, which are those relationships and those friendships that I, continue to see flourish.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the relationships, whether in your cluster, with your own faculty, with other faculty that are a part of the Institute. But I also think what was also rewarding, and one of my favorite parts, was getting to know the TCU team, that I was able to learn a lot from. I got to spend some moments with Rachel Hopper, who's the director of Housing and Residence Life, and we were able to chat, and I was learning from her and her experience as well. So I would say take the time. I'm not sure what it's like to be on Washington's campus, but we were able to get on some of these golf cart moments and talk to some of the residence directors, see what their experience is like on a day-to-day basis. What are they learning from the folks who, I mean, some of them were that are on their team, they were faculty at our institute. And so learning with the people that you're in the institute with, learning from the faculty, but also working with the people who are helping to put on this institute for you. All of it was a great experience. All of it was my favorite, even the late night impromptu moments outside or in the lounge getting coffee late at night. I had a lovely opportunity to go back to the airport. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, but then someone else was like, hey, my faculty member's leaving at the same time, y'all should Uber together. And that was one of the most profound moments, to spend an hour and a half with a faculty member one-on-one to ask questions, even though it's in the middle of the night. So I would say take advantage of every opportunity you have to connect with someone, to continue to build a network, not necessarily just for your own job projection, but like just to get to know them. And things will open up naturally, I think, but all of it was my favorite. I don't know if there's one point in time that was more impactful than the other. But all of it was rich. All of it I would do all over again if I could. From the people I went through the cohort with, my cluster faculty, all of it. But it was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, the late nights really, I learned so much in those times. After the day is done, you really want to go to sleep. And I am a very serious go to sleep girl. Sleep is so important to me. Don't care what you got going on. I'm going to prioritize sleep every time. I pushed myself. The first night I did, I was like, I don't care. I'm sleeping. Oh well, to what you're doing tonight. And then the next day I was like, oh, I missed out on some inside jokes. There were people who had like conversations they were recapping and things that really made me feel like, okay, I might need to give myself an hour past my normal bedtime to interface with folks, right? And it's the time that we spent in the lounge eating snacks and really getting to know each other. There are members of my cohort from NHTI that then I've been in other spaces with that are really, really important to me in my journey, and we've never worked together. And given where our paths are, I find it very unlikely that we will, given just where we are in life, geographically, nonetheless, right? But I know that I can reach out to these people for anything. That if I have a question, we have a group chat. If I need something, I'm wondering how to process something in my office, that I can reach out to those folks. And I know exactly who to reach out to for different things because I spent the time really getting to know them. Because there are 40 people, and I know you're probably thinking, there's no way you know all 40 of those people. And I might not know everything about them, but I know them and I feel confident in my interactions with them in ways that it didn't take me a year like it did with some staff, even staff that I work with now, right? It took a long time. Those 4 days of that experience together really solidified a relationship with them where I know that they can support me. I know if I needed someone to read a resume or help me prepare for something that they would, and they'd be there for me, or even just to talk through an issue. I've called up people multiple times to say, I'm dealing with this on my campus. Have you ever experienced this? And what did you do? And can you just talk me through it? And I didn't have that before. And so I think that network of people, I have to double down on it. It is so important and it is hard to find, right? Like, you may have your network on campus, a couple of mentors and people, but now I have folks across the nation that I probably wouldn't have interacted with in other ways. And this institute put me in that space. And so I do think for me, it's again, like Crystal was saying, pushing yourself. So I stayed up late, I watched basketball with people and different things together where we just really got to know each other. And I think it built this level of comfort to know that I got you, you got me for as long as we need to. People in my cohort don't even work in the field anymore, and we can still connect on different things. And they're willing to give feedback from when I was in the field, I was doing this. And so it doesn't end, even if they decide to transition out. And the other question I have is, what is one piece of advice you have for someone attending NHTI? Kiana, we'll start with you.
I would say, I think something we've all said already, but like push yourself. I was the same way, Dominique. That first night, my flight kept getting delayed and I was up early already. So I was like, sorry, I'm going to bed. I can't stay up any longer. But I made sure to set a time. So for those who are introverts, like set a time out and say, I'm only out for an hour, or I'm only out for 30 minutes, still show your face. There were a few times where there were some faculty I knew I wouldn't have a lot of time to just sit with them. So I made sure to reach out and say like, hey, do you have a few minutes on this time at this day? Or during lunch, can we sit down and talk? For example, one of our faculty members is an executive director in housing, but he is an introvert. And so I made sure to sit down with him and say, hey, how in the world did you get to this place as an introvert that does not fit this character that we see in student affairs, or who we believe are projecting in this field? So hearing his perspective has been valuable to me. Still reaching out to him to get information, like to get advice. So I would say make the time to get to know your faculty, not just your faculty that's in your cluster, but making the time to get to know other faculty, and then making the time to get to know your cohort members. So we had the opportunity to have some affinity group discussions, like do some follow-up, have lunch, have breakfast. We do have tons of meals and breaks. Take advantage of those moments. Take the time you need, of course, to refresh because the days are long, but really be intentional of getting to know the people who you're going to be with. This is the one time that all of you are going to be together for 4 days. Take advantage of it. I promise it will be worth it.
Thank you. And Crystal, what about you?
Yeah, I know we all talk about pushing yourself, and I think that can look different for everyone. So like we all said, just kind of keep that in mind. But I think also bring your business cards. I know that might kind of sound dorky, but there are so many moments where I didn't have an opportunity to connect with someone because again, it is 4 days, but that's a ton of people and you're doing a lot of running around. So I know at the very end or that last day, I gave my card to certain faculty members and they wrote my email down, or they wrote their email down and gave it to me. And it kind of, for me, if I don't see it written down, I'm not going to remember. So, they'd write their info down for me so that I would know to follow up, or they would follow up with me, because I wanted to make sure to make connections with people, but also really, really listen in, because the faculty members are going to share all of their experience, and think about how any of that relates to you. And when you think about what you want your career to do, if anything sparks your interest, if anything is like, oh, I have a question about that is your opportunity to ask them. And even if you don't get to in the moment, like I said, like take their information down and reach out to them after the fact. I promise they're not going to think it's weird. There are some that I reached out to like months after the institute and like, remember when you said that one thing in that really like obscure second for that one presentation? Well, I do. And it's been really rewarding because it also allows me to like build a connection with them that feels like genuine and like kind of organic, because we do have the same interests. So really, really listen into that. So make sure that you have that contact info up to date and that you're, giving it out. There's also just people like Kiana and I, we have a couple of group messages that we're in, but if you ever want to just reach someone directly, it's also good to just, have their information readily available, so you can do that as well. So I would say just like stay up to date and be intentional with, getting that contact info, and then, giving out yours as well.
And can I add to that? Like, as Crystal was saying, it's not weird. They're actually expecting you to do that. The faculty are expecting you to reach out to them and, have one-on-one time. Your cohort members are expecting, for you to reach out to them. Just ask random questions. Like, do not be afraid to do that. It's I guess, an unspoken expectation that will happen.
Yeah, I agree, right? We tell you this about the clusters and those experiences so that you do feel comfortable when you get there, to try to break some of that down. My piece of advice is to remember that this time is about you. We spend all of our time thinking about students. The students need this, the students need that. How can I focus on the students? What about the students? This is really a time for you to think about you. What do I need? What professional development am I looking for? What connections are going to help me become better, right? All of that you do for yourself will eventually serve students, right? It'll come back to them and they will reap the benefits, absolutely. But I want you to remember that this is 4 days to really focus in on who you are as a professional and where you want to go. And everyone there is trying to help you reach that place. And so don't be afraid to be selfish in the time of really thinking about yourself. And I know, again, that that's difficult because we spend so much time thinking of others. And I want to remind you that any good work that you do for yourself, the students will reap the benefits later down the road. And so it is all in service to them every time, and focus on you, right? Right. I did some journaling before I got there to really talk about the things I wanted to focus on at NHTI. Like, these are the topics that we were focused on, right? I knew the competency areas, and this is what I need in each of these areas and what I'm going to be looking for in those conversations. So when I was having conversations with my faculty or my cluster or other faculty members, that I could really drill in on the questions that were going to make me the best whatever I want it to be, right? That ultimately I want to be a director. And so I need these skills and I need to understand them. And even asking folks there, like, how can I get this at home when it's not in my role? Right? Like, this might not be what I'm doing, but you're saying I need to understand this topic at some point. Can you help me figure out how I'm going to be better and get professional development even past this experience? And so take that time to really figure out, like, who am I? What am I looking for? Is this really what I want? Right? Like, this is going to help you make some of those decisions, but don't be afraid to ask the questions about yourself, to drill back in on me, right? And just keep bringing it back to you every time when you're like, oh, well, what about me? I need this thing, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand what you're talking about, or I wonder if you can drive me in the right direction to get the support that I need. And so I really would say, just don't forget you. Like, that's what you're there for. You're investing in yourself. And take up that time, take up that space, and really, really focus on yourself throughout that time. I wanted to see if Crystal and Kiana, if you had any other things that you wanted to add before I opened up the space for other folks to ask questions. Perfect. I'm going to change my screens around so I can see folks, but if there are questions from folks in the audience, we're happy to take those questions now.
Could anyone just kind of speak to the like experience overall of like you said that it's like staying in a like common space together. Is that like a like is it living in like a residence hall situation? Is it like you're eating all your meals together? Like kind of just the nitty-gritty of like what are the days like? What is the like overall living experience like?
Yeah, so go ahead, Spencer. I see you.
No, I'll hop in, and greetings all. I actually, Spencer Kesey from ACUI, he series pronouns. I'm our educational program manager at ACUI, and I have the esteemed privilege of working with NHTI each year. So thrilled you're on the call and have interest in the institute. In terms of the lodging spaces, we are set to be in a residence hall at the University of Washington next July, with individuals having their own rooms. So it would be in a residence hall. You'd have a suite style bathroom and you'd have a private room. We would be having all of our cohorts be in the same residence hall, splitting cohorts off into wings. So you've got some private space, but you'd also have a lounge on the wing dedicated to your cohort time when you have breakout time together, one-on-one meetings. Also in that residence hall, there would be a lounge for all the NHTI attendees to gather. Our hospitality suite is typically what we call, but that is typically fully stocked with beverages and snacks and is open 24/7 for folks to just be able to kind of drop in, hang out, snack, chat. We also have had kind of like a swag giveaway table where everyone kind of brings some school spirit items, and it's just a fun time. But it's kind of a blast from the past in terms of, oh, it's that college experience, but also a little more upscale where, we make sure it feels more like you're staying in a residence inn as opposed to of a residence hall. But it is that on-campus living experience.
And then I know you asked about lunch and things. So lunch is at the same time for folks, if I can be really honest. So sometimes there might be a lunch and learn happening that you want to opt into, but I think we're all pretty understanding that you might just need to get your lunch and go take a break. Everyone has to do what they have to do to take care of themselves. But the time is designed where you can still spend time with these folks. But if you need, like I used to like walk to get coffee, like take a break from folks. Some days I ate lunch all by myself. Like you might need some of that, or it might be a mixture for you. We want you to take care of yourself throughout the process, even if that means taking some time away at those times, right? Like meals are the easiest time to be like, okay, bye. Breakfast is outlined, but I never went to breakfast. It was too early for me. And I was like, well, I don't need to eat. I'll just eat at lunch. So I'll take this extra hour to like mentally prepare for the day.
And that's that West Coast feel, Dom, is you were coming from, Pacific time, Central time, and now we recognize that our attendees, many of them will already be in the Pacific time zone or potentially traveling and gaining more hours. So that 8 a.m. breakfast might feel like 11 a.m. to you if you're from the East Coast, and who knows, you might want to eat earlier than that. But things we adjust in schedule. But I think there's one lunch and learn, and the rest of the meals, the rest of the breakfasts and lunches are kind of, dining hall style. I have seen the dining space as well. They are outstanding. And University of Washington is dedicated to having a lot of different food options available for the attendees. So it's not necessarily going to be your basic like summer conferences food. There should be stations, there should be different dietary needs met, etc. So I know they're really excited to host, and they're going to do an outstanding job. That campus is beautiful. I can't wait for this year's NHTI class to see it and experience it.
Thank you both.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a quick question. First of all, thank you all for being here. I know like this is probably really fun to talk about, but also it's the middle of the workday. What are your tips for I guess completing the application? I know there's like questions that need to be answered, and what are things that folks who are reading these applications are looking for? If you're allowed to share. If you're not allowed to share, you don't have to share.
No, for sure. I can totally share a little bit about that. I think just being really honest. Again, I talked about focusing on yourself. I think the application for me is definitely a place where I hope that you really focus in on what you want to get out of the experience. What are you looking for? We recognize that folks are coming from different levels of experience, different years of experience, and each one of those people might need something different. And we want a cohort that is made up of different people, because the learning from each other is just as important as the learning from faculty. So if you can be honest in there about who you are and what you want, I think that's really helpful. I think one thing I say to everyone is make sure you're answering the question, super important piece. I think it's easy sometimes to ramble and talk about a lot of things, but try to make sure that the actual question is answered in there. I know that that's something that our selection committee looks to. Is like, we don't feel like they answered the question here. And then just know that we are looking holistically at everything we get. The answers that you put to the questions, where you're coming from, how many years of experience you have, your job title, what job titles you've already had. Because again, we want to make a cohort that is representative of lots of different identities, lots of different experiences, because that's how we're going to learn. You all are going to learn the best, right? 48 different people who can really bring together knowledge from all over the country. That's where the learning happens. The faculty are going to do everything to steer you in the right direction, but the 48 of you are going to make your experience. And so we put a lot into like making sure we're not looking for the person who's like, I spend every single hour thinking about housing and there's nothing else. Good for you. That's not the only person we're looking for though, right? Like I want the person who's like, I don't even know if I want to keep doing this. This might be the institute for you because you might really figure that out while you're there. And so we're looking for a multitude of people. So again, just being really honest and answering the questions to the fullest of your abilities.
A couple items I'd add. I know that we even talked about this before we started doing application review, is just because it says a word limit, that doesn't mean you have to get to the limit. I had a grad school professor who always said, do the work, just do the work. So answer the question. Once you've answered it, the question is answered. A couple items I would also just share about NHTI that you can expect. Um, there's going to be a great focus in 2024 on experiential learning. So taking these sessions, but also taking them and putting them into practice. So you're not just sitting in 2-hour informational sessions and when it's done saying, oh, wow, that was neat. I wrote down some notes. Like, because we know that if you're going to put that into your practice, you need to experience it there and then have the support of faculty mentors to work you through that. And can you continue to support that learning as you go through the time together at the Institute? And then the other component is creating your own professional development path. That is going to be really a key focus in 2024. Yes, this is a huge part of what you can do in terms of professional development, but also leaving NHTI with a plan for yourself. What do you want to continue to develop in, and how are you going to do that? It isn't just, well, I hope I get better at blank. Actually having a plan on, does that mean there's going to be specific sessions that you attend at conferences? Does that mean there's specific institutes or conferences that you're pursuing in the future because you're focused on your professional development again? And we know that that can get lost. We know that it is busy, and some of you might be going, wow, it is November 14th. How in the world is it November today? And really refocusing, finding that time to focus back on yourself and your development and how to get where you want to go.